listen, never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Get on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
There is nobody I'd rather have on the podcast right now more than Tim Britton. You can say the same thing. There's no place you'd rather be, Tim, if you like.
There's no podcast I'd rather be on right now.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You know who said that to me on the field? On the Rogers Center field moments after the championship. Michael Kopech. He did. This would have made my day. It made my day.
I imagine someone on that field had to say to you that baseball is not boring, right?
I said this. Well, here's a bizarre thing. Before we get to your excellent projections, time-honored tradition. It's always one of the things I look forward to the most in the entire year is you dropping for the Athletic your projections for free agents, which is just the most unbelievable science that I can ever imagine in the world of baseball. But let me tell you this. After Game 7, you know that I like to hand out baseballs and boring stickers. You know, right? Correct?
Yeah, I've got a few myself.
All right, good. All right. I love it. In people like stickers, people like the message, everything. But after that game, when I gave the stickers to Tony Robbins, it was there is no better. I couldn't have written anything down on a sticker that would have been better than what I handed to not only Tony Robbins but anyone else on that field. Everyone else was yes, this is indisputable. And then on top of it, my other story from that night, and you've been through those games, right? After clinching games and they're on the field and really you do the interview. A lot of the interviews are on the field more than actually. I avoided the champagne showers. Mm-hmm. So I basically, you're on there. I was on there till 1:30 in the morning. Finally, you just have to pull the cord and leave. So I leave. There's still people on the field. I have to go back to the hotel, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize it was daylight savings time until Sunday night. I totally missed it. I was because you have so much to do, and I had to drive to Buffalo and make a flight there. I have so much to do. I didn't even realize that I had an extra hour to do it. I had no idea. None. Anyway, not that anyone cares. I love telling that story, though. So that said, speaking of hours, how about this segue? How many hours did you put in to do your projections? Give me an hour total.
What's hardest is kind of creating the spreadsheet in the first place. And that, as I've said before on this, it really dates back to trying to figure out what John Lester should get paid during the 2014 season when I was covering the Red Sox with you. And I kind of created the spreadsheet then looking at starting pitchers. Then it just grew from there to now I've got more than, I think, 1,200 players in there who have signed basically since around 2014 and some of the landmark contracts before then. And then you just plug and play the guys who are free agents this year and spend, probably 20 to 30 minutes on each guy and more on the big guys trying to figure out what makes sense, who works for him, and how does he fit in this market versus how that guy fit in that market, and play around with it. You called it a science, and that is kind of how you find the initial comparable players for guys. But there's also a feel to it, and sometimes I get that right, and sometimes I get that totally wrong. And that's always kind of the interesting thing is, I feel good about the comps that I'm making, but sometimes I think this guy's on the high end of something, and the market views him more on the low end.
Probably a question I've asked you in previous iterations of this podcast. What was the one that you were most proud of? The projection you were most proud of?
in this current one.
No, 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 not this current one. I'm
Oh,
going to ask, but I am going to ask you about this current one, which one you were most sheepish about, which one you're the most confident about. But I want to talk about, since you've been doing this, which one do you feel like, oh man, I nailed that, and maybe not a lot of people thought that it could be nailed.
I felt pretty good a couple years ago with Shota Imanaga, you know, trying
Well,
to
you're going to get
figure
your
out.
chance again, my friend.
Right, yeah. Trying to figure out players coming from Japan or Korea was difficult. Like, for the first couple of years, I didn't even try because that was a totally different methodology. And then I started looking at how those guys, what they produced in NPB or KBO compared to the league, kind of creating an ERA plus or an OPS plus, and how that compared to other players who had made the transition, how those guys got paid. And so with Imanaga, look, this is the same same offseason that I was $122 million short on Yoshinobu Yamamoto. But Imanaga, I think I said 4 for 52 million, and he signed for 4 for 53. It
Ooh,
was something like that, where I was right around the number. And that made me feel good, not just about that projection, but about the way I went about trying to make projections for players coming over
that's
from
pretty
Asia.
good. That's pretty good. So it's interesting you say that about Japanese players, because obviously now it's every year we have two, three, four guys. This year everyone's focused on Murakami and Akamoto, and but the guy that near the top of your list is, am I saying his name right? Am I? Am,
Uh, I am not sure.
okay.
Ime, I
Am,
haven't.
all right,
It's
all
one of those
right.
words I haven't
This
heard
is
it
one
out
of the
loud
things
yet.
where I look back at how I used to pronounce Yamamoto's name. I'm like, oh, what an idiot I was. But anyway, the Japanese pitcher is 28. So when you do that, when Tatsuya, Tatsuya, right? That's his first name.
Yeah.
Tat. All right.
Mhm.
When you're doing Tat's projection, what do you feel like going into that because of everything you said? Do you feel good? Like, do you feel much better about it than even like Yamamoto or Imanaga from a few years ago?
I feel a little bit better about it than, I felt pretty good about the Yamamoto one when I made it. I think I projected him for like 7 years and $203 million. And that felt like that was going to be a lot of money for a guy who'd never pitched in the major leagues. And he blew that out of the water and had several teams willing to do that for him. And so with MI, I basically looked at, the guys he compares closest to for his performance in NPB are guys like Yusei Kikuchi, Kodai Senga, going back to Hiroki Kuroda. And those are kind of like, guys who are more mid-rotation starters than frontline rotation
Mm.
starters. But then where you try to read the market a little bit is, his last season, his most recent season in NPB looked an awful lot like Daisuke's last season in Japan. And if you project out what Daisuke got in 2007 and put that into today's money, well, that's a lot more. That is closer to over $200 million. And you throw in that you've had so many more Japanese pitchers succeed at this level and succeed right away. That Senga and Imanaga had really good first seasons. That Yamamoto just had as good a postseason as we've ever seen. And Yamamoto, like another diminutive right-hander, like that's the knock on Ime is that he's under 6 feet tall. So is Yamamoto. That helps him probably make more this winter than he would have otherwise. And so, whereas a year or two ago, I might have said, okay, he's going to get, extrapolate out what Kikuchi or Senga got. The success of some of those guys makes me think he's going to go higher than that and closer to what Matsuzaka got in today's money.
It is interesting you talk about stature. We just had Ottavino. We just had on the next GM of the Colorado Rockies on Adam Ottavino, and he was talking about. I didn't even thought of that. I said, what will everyone try to do off of the Yamamoto excellence? And he said, well, it might open up a new lane for shorter pitchers, and like it's a copycat league, and I think that it was sort of trending the other way. You see these mammoth guys across the board. But maybe he's right. Like maybe like that helps a guy like Amai. Maybe it helps him. I don't know. So yeah, I just want to put
Yeah, I
that.
mean, I think there's different ways of looking at things. I try to when I'm doing this, and when I'm thinking about like what the Mets can do in the offseason is think less about what players don't do well and think more about what they bring to the table. And in Yamamoto's case, it was incredible stuff and diverse stuff, and that he wasn't your traditional 6'5", 240-pound workhorse type Roger Clemens body doesn't mean he can't be a guy who pitches one and two-thirds innings one night after throwing 96 pitches in a World Series game. So I think teams being open-minded to the potential in players is driving their thought processes more than kind of the traditional putting guys into boxes the way they might have 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, well said. Excellent. No wonder you get a perfect score in your SATs. Good job. Even though Dustin Pedroia doesn't think you went to the right school. You could have gone to Arizona State.
I know I could have gone there.
You could have gone to Arizona State. But I think things worked out for you. All right. Speaking of working out, when you look at last year's class, when you look at last year's projections, I would imagine it's very difficult when you get a guy at the top of the list or some guys at the top of the list that get so to the levels that you got with Soto, with Fried, with these guys, because it just sort of keeps going up and up and up. What was your takeaway from doing it last year?
Yeah, I think, the casual fans' reaction to my projections this year is going to be like, wow, these are really high. I don't want to spend this much on anyone. And I think that a lot of that is reaction to last year where I was low on a lot of the bigger names that you mentioned. Like, Soto, look, I had him over 600 million. You had four teams willing to go to 700 million for him. I was with Fried, I think I had him around 150 or 160 million, and he went way above that. I was low on Snell, low on Willie Adames as well. And it's not just that it wasn't like one team went out of the way and said, whatever, we're going to spend 50% more on this guy than anyone else. It's that you had several teams in on the market for those guys. You go back to Yamamoto 2 years ago, again, it was like four teams willing to give that guy $300 million. So that's how the market is reading him more than just one team going crazy. So I think, when I look back at last year, the lesson is kind of that the way youth is valued in particular, which we've seen with Soto and Yamamoto. The way, the hardest thing is kind of figuring out which teams might try to stretch a contract the way the Yankees did with Fried, stretch that to 8 years. But even when teams do that, it's not like the AAV comes down that much. It's not like you're saying, we're willing to give Max Fried, 6 years and 210, so we'll go to 8 years and 218. That's still a pretty solid AAV that he's getting with the Yankees. So every year there's diverse takeaways. My takeaways last year was that when I'm looking at an uncomfortably high projection, that's probably means I'm closer to where it's going to end up than otherwise. And I applied that in the spring with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., where I was like, is this guy really going to get close to $500 million? Like, you look at his numbers, and the numbers, like, they barely support that. They barely, you can imagine he should be closer to 300 million than 500 million when I was doing that. And I was like, well, Soto got it. So that's the most recent data point. And you end up with Guerrero getting $500 million, and that's going to be the data point that people like Kyle Tucker use, that Pete Alonso uses, that a lot of players in this market are going to use.
We're going to deviate away from science. I'm going to ask you a hypothetical. You mentioned Vlad, it just top of my head. Do you think he makes more money now into this? Would you project him at more than 500 million?
Probably. He's coming off another really good season. The difficulty with him was he was so good in 21, he was mediocre in 22 and 23, and then really good in 24. And most guys, when you're talking about the kind of money that you were talking about with him, are guys who are really good year in and year out, the way Soto had been. And so there was a little bit more fluctuation in his performance that has evened out now. Now you have three really good seasons in the last five, and you have a postseason that shows that this guy, when he's on, is one of the elite hitters in baseball. Like, a top five hitter in the sport. Part of the reason he made $500 million was the Blue Jays were desperate to kind of signal to their fan base that we need to keep, we're in it. We're going to keep one of these guys. We're going to land one of these big names. And I don't know that dynamic would change too much if they were just made the World Series and had just finished, 2 outs shy of the World Series of a championship. I feel like they would feel the need to bring Guerrero back even stronger than they did in the spring.
All right, I'm going to expertly add a subset to that question, which I find fascinating, which is how guys make more money off of 3 weeks in October, or potentially 1 week in October, or potentially 2 weeks in October, the postseason bump. We've seen it a million times. It's a very real thing. It just is. I can give a lot of examples for this. And so when you're doing these projections, do you have to factor that in at all? I know that front offices will say no, it doesn't, but I'll give you an example. And because I'm always sort of trying to identify who is going to get this bump, who is going to be perceived differently just from these couple of weeks. I guess Shane Bieber won't be one that jumps to mind, right? That if his season ended on October 1st, there might be some like, oh, I don't know. But what he did in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it sort of advances his conversation, I think. But from your perspective, does it change anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. Like, certainly with peak performance in the postseason. I go back to Lester 10 years ago, when he hits free agency after the 2014 season. He too had gone through some kind of ups and downs in his performance. Had the bad 2012 season, was struggling the first half of 2013, and then pitched lights out in the postseason in 2013. Was the number one starter, was an ace caliber starter for the team that won the World Series. Probably wins World Series MVP if David Ortiz hits anything less than 650 in that World Series. And so, when you have that kind of level of performance when it matters most, then yeah, like teams are going to look at you and say that's what's in there. That's what the guy's capable of. Let's try to get to that more often. And when you just show your potential at the highest level, I think that that's going to make more teams interested in giving you as much money as possible.
So who is the guy in your estimation that maybe hit the sweet spot in regards to that? Maybe it's Bieber, maybe it's, I don't know, Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette's another one. But maybe it's Chris Bassett. Is there any guy that jumps out to you that may have amped up his worth off of the postseason?
I mean, I think Bichette having the kind of World Series that he had on a bum knee, that does it for him. I think coming into this, I don't know how comfortable I would have been projecting him over $200 million, given the health concerns, given the year he had last year. But now I feel a little bit better that at least one team is going to make that gamble on him. I think you look at like Josh Naylor and the postseason that he had in Seattle, and being kind of, just being on that stage again, and being a useful pivotal player. Like, it's one thing for Josh Naylor to steal 30 regular season bases, and it just be like, I don't know, here and there he's swiping a bag. It's another when he takes third with one out in a game 5 of the division series and scores the first run off Tarek Skubal. Like that shows you like that there's value in his base running. It's not empty. And so I think that's another guy who could get paid better because he was in a big spot in the postseason and played well.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Again, I'm just sort of fascinated by that. It's just a weird dynamic. It just is. I mean, when you're talking about 3 weeks, it could be 3 weeks in August, 3 weeks in June, but it's 3 weeks in October, and the example that I always gave, we come off the 2018 Red Sox. Nathan Eovaldi was bad in September. If the season ends, he doesn't get his deal. The guy who the CEO of this entity, Joe Kelly, if he doesn't make the postseason roster, which he almost didn't make, no way he gets a 3-year deal from the Dodgers. So anyway, so the question, as I told you, we're going to ask this question, and I am going to ask it. We'll start with, which projection do you feel really good about? So I'm going to write this down so I can yell it at you when it doesn't come to fruition. So anyway, which projection do you feel really good about?
Uh, I think I feel pretty good about Naylor is one, kind of the 4 years, 92 million. I think that's a good sweet spot for him. I think the Bregman at 6 and 171, I feel makes some sense. Maybe
That
Dylan
because
Cease at
of,
6
let
for
me
one.
ask you something about that. Is that because we have the example of Matt Chapman?
Yeah, I mean, like that is the exact guy that you're working off of for the comp. There is that
Yeah, lost
that
qualifying offer, same age, everything. Yeah,
signed the 3-year deal, opted out, had a good season. I mean, Chapman had a better season that first year in San Francisco than Bregman had, but I think you'd probably say the overall track record trends toward Bregman. So much of Chapman's value is defensive, and so you'd feel a little bit more comfortable giving Bregman the bigger money. And it's, I mean, obviously it's the same agent, so that helps. So I think I feel good about that. And I was going to say Dylan Cease at 6 years and 174 million probably jumps off the page as ooh, that's a lot for a guy who just had a 4.55 ERA and has had more than a 4.52 of the last 3 years. But you look at the peripheral stats, a strikeout rate that was 33% this past year. I think that's what teams look at now more than kind of the back of the baseball card stats that we're used to, like wins, losses, and ERA. So I wouldn't be surprised if he got close to that amount that I projected there.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, you can't go forget about the teams. You can't go off the back of the baseball cards. You know, you have to find what are teams valuing more than anything. Like that's really even since you started this. I mean, I would imagine, and I know that you wrote about it. I know that you sort of went into detail about how this has evolved, but it really has. I mean, you can't just say, oh, well, this guy had a bad ERA, and they're not going to give him the money. Look at, for instance, Nick Pivetta last year, right? Nick Pivetta was. Now, it took him a while to get the deal, but the perception was that he was going to get a deal because of all this underlying stuff. So, and that's why he got his deal, honestly. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I look back to last year, like, two pitchers that I had initially making around the same amount were Frankie Montas and Jose Quintana. And Montas had like a 1.5 win, 1.5 win season. Quintana had a 1 win season. Quintana's primary, like his ERA and stuff, were better. They both pitched into the postseason, and they end up like Quintana goes from the Mets to the Brewers, Montas goes from the Brewers to the Mets. But Quintana signs, I think it was like for 6 million, and Montas signs 2 years and 34 million, and that's because Montas's stuff is different. His peripherals were a little bit different, and that's what teams were valuing. Did it work out? Did it work out for the Mets? Certainly not. Quintana ended up being the better gamble, but that's the way teams look at this: is what is the ceiling on this guy, and how confident are we that we can get that guy to that ceiling?
Okay, which one? Conversely, Tim, which one don't you feel super about that you feel a little uneasy about?
I mean, I think like you feel uneasy about like 7 years for Framber Valdez, just because he is a little bit, in the sense we're talking about the stuff that a pitcher has. He's not throwing 97, 98. He's already going to be 32 next season. So I was basing that a little bit off of what Fried got last year. I think if Valdez signs for 5 or 6 years, the AAV is going to be higher than what I said. I think I had 7 years at 196, so 28 per year. He might get 30 million per season if he signs for 5. But that was one that I think, it would not surprise me if he didn't get to that point.
Yeah, and the cost, by the way,
is another
and the cost of extra chest protectors for the catchers as well.
And you got that, like that's another thing that certainly teams are gonna think about with Framber. At the beginning of the season, I had Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto kind of in the same box as guys. Maybe they'll sign for like 3 years and 60 million. And now I've got Schwarber at 145 million and Realmuto at 45. And basing so much of a veteran track record on one season feels a little off. But then again, Schwarber is probably going to finish second in the MVP voting, and Realmuto is a 2-win player and has been for a couple of years. So it does feel like that gap, which seems huge considering where they were in spring training, is probably where it is now.
So what's life like for you now, other than watching your kids and being a good husband and all that stuff? But what's life like for you now? You finish this, you publish it, people are consuming it, digesting it, aggregating it. And I think that, to your credit, Tim, and I mean this sincerely, is that I think that you've not only done this for a while, but done it so well for a while that, it's the same thing like MLB trade rumors. I'll give them a lot of credit too. Like, you both do such a good job of this, where it really is a valuable resource, a hugely valuable resource heading into hot stove season. So for you now, is there this sigh of relief? Okay. Or is this, do you get anxiety at all from watching the contracts unfold?
A little bit, you don't want to be totally wrong. You don't want to misread everything about either an individual player or the market as a whole. Like last year, I remember, I think it was mid-November, and Yusei Kikuchi signed for 3 years and 63 million, which was exactly what I had said. And my editor texted me, he's like, "You're 1 for 1." And then by the time we're at the winter meetings, someone else signed for more than I had said. I'm like, "I'm 1 for 10, I'm 1 for 15." You know, you feel bad when you get to a certain point. You're like, oh, like these guys just, they're valued differently than what I expected. If Kyle Tucker signs for 1 year and $6 million tomorrow, I'm going to feel stupid saying he should get $460 million. But I don't think it's going to happen with Tucker. But there's if a contract is like kind of within range or makes sense to me, I'll feel fine. But if I totally misread something, then I'm going to feel bad about that.
Well, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe out of the gate, there was a, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a run on relievers and there was sort of like relievers out of the gate. I forget what it was, but maybe it was Edwin Diaz, but it was wow,
Mhm.
relievers, they're coming in hot on relievers, right? And then so when you see a trend like that, you're probably like, what? That must be a little uneasy.
Yeah, I think one of the things we'll probably do this year is offer some more periodic updates over the course of the offseason. Like you asked me earlier, what projection I'm most proud of. I go back to the 2015 offseason. I wasn't doing this full time, like for every player, but I was covering the Red Sox, and Jordan Zimmerman came off the board early in the offseason. And I said, okay, the Red Sox are in on David Price. If Price is paid the way Zimmerman's paid, what should Price make? I'm still mad at myself for the way I phrased this. I said, he should get 7 years at about $31 million per season. So 7 years, 220, something like that. And then he signed for 7 years at 217, $31 million per season. And I'm like, why did I round? I should have just stuck with the number. I would have nailed it. But that's the value of seeing how the market evolves over the first couple of weeks and how guys are going to be valued. That reliever market, I think that was the year like Atlanta signed a couple of guys right out of the gates in November because Alex Anthopoulos likes to work quickly. And you just get that changes how other guys are going to get paid. If the Mets sign Edwin Diaz tomorrow for 5 years and 150 million or something crazy, then Robert Suarez is going to make more money than we thought, and Reyes Iglesias is going to make more money than we thought. If Diaz signs for 3 years and 50 million, then those guys are going to get less than we thought. That there are kind of those bellwether players, and when they sign early, it does really affect the rest of the market.
The last thing is the last guy that I wanted to talk about, and it's partly because he's isn't an interesting case, but also because you cover him, is Pete Alonso. He's a guy who, as Scott Boras will crow about, he no longer has the qualifying offer. It's just like Scott Boras loves when guys lose the qualifying offer, right? It's so Pete Alonso is heading in the market. He's really an interesting one because okay, you could just pigeonhole him as this guy, big slugging corner infielder. What's that worth? But he's also a guy that plays 162, which I think is a dramatically underrated stat, and good clubhouse guy. So maybe for teams looking for good clubhouse guys, can hit home runs, which if we're going off the postseason, that's really, really important to hit home runs. So for your perspective, and I know that you have it in your column, sort of a chart of what you've projected Pete Alonso over the years, which is sort of all over the place. So how do you look at him right now?
I'm really interested in seeing how it plays out for him this winter, because what the problems he had last year. He's coming off of kind of consecutive down seasons for him in 23 and 24. He had the qualifying offer attached. It wasn't a robust first base market, but there were some other kind of mid-level options that teams decided to go for, like Christian Walker, like Nathaniel Lowe was traded to Washington, those kinds of moves. And this year, you've got a little bit more of a robust first base market because not only do you have Naylor, but you've got Murakami and Okamoto coming over from NPB, who could potentially be first base options. But you also have Alonso coming off of a better season, a better all-around season, where he showed that even if he's only hitting 38 home runs instead of 45, there's still value in his bat. And you're coming off, we've seen, even if like his defensive metrics are down, he had a more difficult defensive season than he's ever had before. And if his future, if he signs a 5-year deal, it's to be a DH at some point in that deal. We're also looking at a National League MVP finalist field of Shohei Ohtani, DH, Kyle Schwarber, DH, Juan Soto, not a great defensive outfielder. offense is still the most important thing that a position player can do and produce. And so in that sense, like Alonso, I ended up kind of in the same spot I did last year, 5 years and 140 million, because he's a year older, but coming off of a better season. And it's tough to figure out exactly what team is going to go after him at that level. It could be a team that decides like, hey, we're kind of settled at first base, but maybe we can make things work. A team that came close to him last year was Toronto. And, you know, uh, the Mets still make the most sense to me because they don't have a first baseman. They don't have a DH without Alonso. They have holes at both spots, and not many contending teams do. But I'm definitely interested in seeing who else gets into that bidding and maybe gets Alonso to where he wants to be this time around.
Do you feel when you're doing these projections, when you get a chance to see a guy as much as you saw Alonso, Diaz, these guys, does that sway you at all? I know that's sort of a big picture question. Maybe there's not an easy answer. You like to say, well, no, the numbers are the numbers. It is what it is. But still, sometimes you look at the numbers, you look at we have friends in the business like, nah, man, that guy stinks. Or no, that guy's awesome. Look at the intangibles. Seeing a guy like Alonso, like I said, like Diaz, does that sway? Do you think that subliminally, that's terrible, subtly changes or sways you at all?
I think it helps because you get a sense of when do these guys' hits come? Is he coming up with hits in key spots, or is the bat, are a lot of those home runs, ninth inning home runs off of position players or off of the last guy in a bullpen in a blowout? You get a sense of that. Honestly, it probably helps me most defensively because there are times where you think, a guy reputationally seems like a good defender, and then you look at his numbers, you're like, huh, they're not that good this year. Like, what happened to him? And if you're seeing him, 120 times a year rather than 6, you have a better shot of figuring that out. And so I feel better about my handle of Alonso's defense because I saw him 162 times rather than just a couple series here and there. So that helps. You don't want to get swayed too much by knowing the player more because not all these the Rockies and Chris Bryant didn't know each other very well, and they clearly when they came to terms on that deal. So but I do think in general it does help just to have as much knowledge as possible. Like I wish that I could spend that much time watching all these guys on the list to have a better feel for who they are as players, what they like to do when they come up big, and that kind of thing.
You should go to Japan. I mean, if the Athletic isn't sending you to Japan, all the work that you're doing, come on. Like, I think you've earned it. Your brand has never been hotter. So let's go. That's worth a trip to Japan. Did you go to Japan with me? I can't remember. No, you were too young. You were at Arizona State. I mean, dude, you were at the Arizona State of North Carolina, Duke. So, right?
Yeah, that it was, devils go together, right?
Yeah, 2008. Is that where were you?
Yeah. I was finishing my junior year of college.
Okay. All right. Just check. Well, you should. I workshopped it for you so you could go over now. I honestly believe you've earned the right to go over to watch these guys. All right. I'll hold on. Note to self.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Email people at Athletic. All right. Well, thank you. You're doing the Lord's work, and I hope you feel good about yourself. I hope you feel good about things because Tim, like I sincerely mean it. Where I'm not just lying to you when I compliment you. I sincerely mean it. When I say like this is like such that the off season started when this column comes out, and it is such a valuable resource for so many people. And it's fun, man, and that's the other part about this. It's the entertainment business. It's fun. So good job by you.
Yeah, I feel good about it until the first contract comes in. That's how it works.
You can again just spin it. It's always something that's wrong, so it's all good. Here's my last words I will say about this. It looks good to me. It looks good to me. So there you go.
The story is yet to be told.
The story is yet to be told. All right.